My name is Carol Hazen. I'm 24 years old. And this is the story of how my own father emptied my college fund behind my back, lied to everyone I love, and how I made sure he'd regret every dollar he stole. I was standing alone in the middle of my tiny London apartment when it happened. The walls were bare, the air still. The only sound was the faint hum of city traffic outside my window, and the quiet cruelty in my father's voice crackling through the phone speaker. "You didn't need that money, Carol. You're smart. I know you'll figure something out." His words punched a hole through my chest. I felt it physically, a hot, tight squeeze right between my lungs. My fingers clenched around my phone, my breath shaky. "How much is left?" I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. He paused just for a second. Then, "None." That single word snapped something inside me. "Carol," he sighed, as though I were the one making life difficult. "I had some debts to take care of. But don't worry. You'll manage." He was talking about my college fund. The money I had built from nothing, slowly year by year. My scholarships, my tutoring jobs, the endless late-night cafe shifts that gave me dark circles and wrist pain. All of it gone. In silence. Behind my back. "How long ago did you take it?" I whispered. "It's been a while," he said lightly, as if it were pocket change. "Honestly, you should be out enjoying life, not stressing over books and degrees." I was so stunned I couldn't even cry. He chuckled then, that same hollow, self-satisfied chuckle I'd heard 1,000 times growing up. "That's my girl," he said, mistaking my silence for obedience. "Always practical. Just like your old man. Anyway, I gotta run, meeting up with some friends." Then the line went dead. I stood still for a long time. The room didn't feel like mine anymore. Nothing did. My father had just taken $38,000 from the one safe space I'd ever had. My future. And didn't even think it was worth an apology. That was the part that shattered me. Not just the theft, but the ease of it. As if I didn't matter. Buzz. New message. "Don't tell your mom or grandma. No need to worry them." Of course he didn't want them to know. Just like he hadn't wanted them to know about the gambling. The second mortgage. The credit cards. The times he pawned my mother's jewelry and convinced her she'd misplaced it. I had grown up watching him lie with a smile on his face. And somehow, I still believed he wouldn't do this to me. I was wrong. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. The screen flickered, then loaded. There it was. Transaction after transaction. Small withdrawals, always under the alert limit. Slow bleed. He'd been draining the account for 3 months. Not in one lump sum, he was smarter than that. He planned it. He studied how to go unnoticed. And he succeeded. I pressed a hand to my chest and sat down slowly, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. I had trusted him. The door creaked open. "Carol!" My roommate Emma stepped inside. Her eyes widened the moment she saw my face. "What happened?" I couldn't speak at first. I just turned the laptop toward her. She read for a moment, then gasped. Did someone hack you?" I swallowed hard. "My dad." Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God. Carol, I worked so hard for that money," I whispered. "And he didn't even blink." Emma sat beside me, eyes scanning the numbers, the dates. "You need to report him. This is theft." "I can't." My voice cracked. "He's a co-owner. I added him when I was 17 so he could help me deposit scholarship checks while I was traveling." She stared at me in horror. "But you earned it. Carol, you did everything right. You worked, you saved, this isn't fair." "No," I said quietly. "It's not." Another buzz. Another message. "Don't stress about the money. Maybe take a break from school. Pretty. You could model instead of wasting time on classes. I know people." A white-hot rage tore through me. My dad didn't just steal from me. He reduced me to a face, a body, a "maybe you should model," after I clawed my way into one of the best universities in the UK. All because it was easier for him to gamble with my future than face his own failures. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't scared of him anymore. I opened a new browser tab. Bank statements. Emails from my scholarship advisors. I downloaded everything. Every deposit. Every transfer. Every receipt. I would document it all. Not just for myself, but for anyone who dared to question what I was about to do. Turn to Emma. I'm going to fight him. She didn't hesitate. I've got your back. That night I didn't sleep. I stayed up researching legal co-ownership laws, financial theft, student protections. If I couldn't charge him criminally, I'd drag him through every legal loop until he felt it. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about every birthday dollar he borrowed and never returned. Every lie he whispered to my mom while she cried in the bathroom thinking it was her fault the mortgage was late. Every time he made me feel like I was being dramatic for questioning him. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I was going to make him regret ever thinking I was someone he could control. And this was just the beginning. The next morning, I stood outside the university's financial aid office, the cold air cutting through my jacket, my fingers numb around the manila folder clutched to my chest. Inside were my printed bank statements, scholarship confirmation emails, and screenshots of my father's messages. I had barely slept, but there was no time for rest now. I needed answers. I needed help. The advisor's name was Ms. Matthews. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and silver-rimmed glasses, and she listened patiently as I poured out everything. I didn't cry. I wouldn't let myself. When I finished, she let out a long sigh and gently folded her hands on the desk. Carol, I'm so sorry this happened to you, she said. You've done everything right. This isn't your fault. I blinked fast. Her kindness was almost worse than cruelty. We do have emergency grants for students in distress. It won't replace the entire amount, but it can help you finish the year. I'll also refer you to student legal services. They've helped students in similar cases, especially when financial abuse is involved. Financial abuse. I hadn't even thought of it like that. But when she said it, something clicked. That's what this was. Not just theft, but a pattern of exploitation masked by love. I'll do whatever it takes, I said quietly. She nodded. And Carol, don't let this derail your future. You've worked too hard. Later that afternoon, I sat in the student legal office, across from a young attorney named Darian. He had a sharp jawline and an even sharper mind. He flipped through the folder with a focused intensity, occasionally muttering things like, strategic pattern, calculated withdrawals, co-ownership boundaries. When he finally looked up, his face was grim. You're right, technically because your father was a co-owner he had access. But we have something stronger, intent. He tapped the printed messages. These texts show he knew the money was for your education. He didn't just withdraw it, he misused it. That's grounds for a civil case. And if he refuses to cooperate, we can apply pressure with a formal letter of demand. I leaned in. Would he have to repay it? In most cases, yes, if we can prove the funds were designated for your use and not shared income. A slow fire began to build in my chest. Oh, not blind hope but sharp, informed hope. We'll draft the letter, he said, and make it very clear. He repays or we take legal action. He nodded. Do it. 3 days later, I called the one person I had tried to protect from all of this. My grandmother. She answered on the second ring. Carol. Hi, Grandma. My voice trembled. What's wrong? She asked instantly. You sound like you've been crying. I told her everything. The stolen money. The messages. The lies. The way he laughed when I confronted him. I read his texts out loud so she could hear his words for herself. There was a long pause on the other end. Then she said very quietly, You did the right thing telling me. We won't let him get away with this. 3 days later, she organized a family meeting. My father wasn't invited. It was surreal sitting in my grandmother's living room again, the floral curtains unchanged, the scent of lavender still clinging to the cushions. But the room felt different, stronger, united. My mother sat on the couch, pale, a printout of my father's texts trembling in her hands. She didn't look at me. She just read the messages over and over, her lips pressed into a thin line. My Aunt Lauren, a lawyer, sat beside her, flipping through the bank statements with silent fury. Finally, my mom looked up. "He told me you dropped out of school," she said in a small voice. "He said you were feeling lost and needed time to figure things out." I let out a bitter laugh. "And you believed him?" She flinched, then nodded slowly. "Yes, I did." I had waited my whole life for that moment, for her to finally admit that she chose to believe his lies over my truth. But it didn't feel like victory, just felt sad. "I'm sorry," she said, voice cracking. "I really thought he'd changed." Grandma's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "No one in this family will ever believe him again." She turned to Aunt Lauren. "What can we do?" Lauren adjusted her glasses. "Legally, his co-ownership complicates things. But he's exposed himself. These messages admit the funds were for Carol's education. We can issue a formal letter demanding repayment. If he refuses, we sue." I straightened. "Do it." Aunt Lauren gave a small, icy smile. "With pleasure." That night, as we prepared dinner together, something we hadn't done since I was a kid, my mother asked Aunt Lauren quietly, "Can you help me with something else?" Lauren tilted her head. "What is it?" "I want a divorce." There it was. The word she had never dared to say before. A hush fell over the room. Even the kitchen timer stopped ticking, as if the house itself was listening. Grandma looked at her daughter with a strange mix of sorrow and pride. "You finally see him for who he really is." 2 days later, my father received the letter. Less than an hour after it was delivered, my phone exploded. "What are you doing? You're ruining my reputation. Family doesn't sue each other. Don't do this, Carol. We can work this out. I'll pay it back." He called 6 times. I didn't answer. On the 7th call, I picked up. "Hello, Dad." His voice was tight. "What are you thinking? You're turning your back on your own family over a few $1,000s. A few thousand." I laughed bitterly. That was my future. I said I'd pay it back. "When?" I demanded. "Give me a date." Silence. "I can't promise a date, but..." "Then don't waste my time." He switched tactics, his voice softening. "You know I was just trying to do what's best for the family, right? You wouldn't actually sue your own father." Pause. Let him squirm. "You're right. I won't sue you." A beat of relief. "But Aunt Lauren will." Silence. The kind that says everything he didn't want to hear. "You can't do this to your father," he whispered. "You did this to yourself," I said. Then I hung up. And this time, it was my voice that echoed in his head. 3 days passed in eerie silence. I hadn't heard from my father since I ended our last call, and I didn't expect to. But deep down, I knew he wasn't finished. My father had never been the type to retreat quietly. He didn't feel guilt, only the sting of losing control. That sting must have been unbearable, because on the 4th morning, my grandmother called me with a sharpness in her voice I hadn't heard in years. "Carol," she said tightly, "your father just showed up at my house." I straightened in bed. "What did he say?" She let out a bitter chuckle. "He begged me to talk you out of this. Said you were tearing the family apart. Said you were being manipulated by outsiders." "Did you believe him?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Her voice turned cold. "I told him he tore this family apart a long time ago. You're the only one trying to put things back together." Closed my eyes. "Thank you." There was a pause, and then her voice softened. "Carol, there's something I haven't told you." My heart skipped. "What is it?" She exhaled slowly. "Your mother, she went through far more than you know. He didn't just lie to her or take money. He controlled her. Emotionally. Financially. Every time she tried to leave, he'd guilt her, shame her, tell her she couldn't survive without him. She believed it for too long. The anger came back like a tide. I had spent most of my childhood trying to make sense of the way my mother shrank when he entered the room. The way her eyes darted to his before answering a question. I always thought it was fear, but I didn't know how deep it ran. She believed he'd change, I said quietly. She believed he was capable of change, Grandma corrected. But he's not. And I think this time she's finally done. And she was right. That same week my mother filed for divorce. With Aunt Lauren by her side, she submitted documents, compiled evidence, and prepared to split a life she'd once fought so hard to protect. I wasn't there when she served him the papers, but I imagined the look on his face. The panic, the disbelief, the rage masked by fake confusion. And still, he refused to take responsibility. Instead, he launched a full-blown manipulation campaign. He called every family member, every friend, spinning a web of half-truths and victimhood. "She's trying to destroy me," he told Uncle James. "She's just young and bitter and being influenced by outsiders. I know she lost money," he sighed to Aunt Patricia. "But I'm old. I don't have time to rebuild." Is this really how she wants her father to end up? With nothing. To his surprise, no one bought it. Instead of isolating me, he dug his own grave. One by one, people began to come forward. Stories I had never heard surfaced like buried bodies. Uncle James recalled the $15,000 loan my father had begged for to invest in a sure thing. Money that vanished, along with the business it was supposed to fund. Aunt Patricia spoke about the education savings she and her husband had built for their twins. Money my father had borrowed and never returned. Even second cousins and old friends started coming out of the woodwork, each with a version of the same story. He asked, he promised, he disappeared. The pattern was undeniable. I wasn't the first. I had just been the last straw. While my father spiraled into isolation, I kept going. After reviewing my case, the university approved me for an emergency scholarship. It wasn't everything I had lost, but it was enough to keep me enrolled. Ms. Matthews, the financial aid advisor, also helped me secure a small grant from a local education nonprofit, and introduced me to a quiet opportunity one never expected. "There's an opening at the city library," she said. "It's part-time, but it comes with a stipend and a student work-study package. You'd be perfect." A week later, I was shelving books in the fiction aisle, finding comfort in stories far less wild than my own. It wasn't glamorous, but it was safe. It was stable. And it was mine. I worked there 3 nights a week, sometimes 4, and spent every spare hour studying, determined not to fall behind. I finished assignments at midnight, edited essays on the tube, and graded tutoring work during lunch breaks. I was exhausted constantly, but I wasn't broken. If anything, I was rising. The court proceedings moved slowly, but surely. My mother's divorce filings unearthed more than just missing money. Bank records revealed how my father had mortgaged the house behind her back, how he had siphoned credit cards into secret accounts, how he used her name to apply for loans he never intended to repay. Aunt Lauren built the case brick by brick until the image he had worked so hard to project, the charming, dependable family man, crumbled under its own weight. The judge ordered a higher share of marital assets to my mother, citing financial abuse. And more importantly, he was legally obligated to repay the amount he had taken from my college fund, $38,241.62. He had 6 months to begin repayment. At first, he ignored the court's warnings. Then he sent me a string of texts. "You're destroying me. Do you have any idea how much I've sacrificed for you? Family comes first, Carol. Do you really want to watch your own father suffer?" I didn't respond. When he tried a softer approach, "Just give me more time. Don't push me too hard. I will pay you back." I simply forwarded the message to Aunt Lauren. By then, I understood something that had taken me years to learn. My father wasn't sorry. He didn't feel remorse. He only regretted being caught. The day his first repayment was due, I woke to a simple bank notification. Deposit received. $2,500 from Gregory Hazen. I stared at it for a long time. The money wasn't the point. It was what it represented. For the first time in my life, he was being forced to face consequences. He didn't control me anymore. 3 years later, I stood at the edge of a stage wearing a navy blue gown and a cap that felt too tight over my curls. My heart was pounding again, but this time for a very different reason. The graduation speaker was wrapping up with something generic about chasing dreams and believing in yourself, but I barely heard it. I was too focused on the crowd. I spotted them immediately. My mother and grandmother, sitting side by side in the third row. My mother was crying, openly and without shame. My grandmother had a hand on her arm, steady and proud. They looked up at me with a kind of love that didn't ask for anything in return. I had made it. Despite everything. Despite my father. Despite the stolen money, the sleepless nights, the legal battles, the exhaustion and doubt and moments where I genuinely thought I might break. I had made it. With honors. As I stepped up to receive my degree, the applause from the audience sounded muffled, almost dreamlike. In that moment, it felt like the universe was giving me back a piece of something I had lost. After the ceremony there were photos, hugs, flowers. My cheeks hurt from smiling, but I didn't mind. I wanted to remember all of it. I wanted proof that I had come through the storm and stood tall at the other end. It wasn't until later that I saw the message. An unknown number. But I didn't need to guess who it was. Congratulations, my girl. I always knew you'd succeed. Do you have time to call your dad? I stared at the screen, the weight of his words far heavier than any cap or gown. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what he was trying to do. This wasn't about me. It never had been. It was about him. About inserting himself into the narrative now that there was something to gain. Now that I had proven he hadn't ruined me. He wanted a share of that. Even if it was just emotional credit. I locked my screen and slid the phone into my bag. I didn't reply. 2 months later, I moved to London full-time for a job I still couldn't believe I'd landed. A financial analyst at a prestigious consulting firm in the city. It didn't pay millions, but it was enough. It was mine. My own apartment, a cozy walk-up in the heart of Hackney, with a big window and a second-hand couch I'd bargained for at a flea market. Every item in that apartment had been earned. Not gifted. Not stolen. Earned. Emma, now living just a few stops away, helped me settle in. We spent weekends building IKEA furniture and laughing over bad takeout, the memories of our shared college nightmares already fading. Life had a rhythm now. Peace. I no longer woke up dreading phone calls or texts or waiting for the next disaster. My mother was thriving, she'd taken up painting again. Grandma had downsized to a smaller cottage in the countryside, where she tended roses and wrote short stories. We had built something real, a family of women who had endured but more importantly survived. But of course my father wasn't finished. One morning I opened my phone to a message from Emma. Have you seen this? There was a link. Tapped it. It led to a public Facebook post from my father. There he was, smiling in an old photo of us from when I was maybe 6 or 7, sitting on his lap holding a crayon drawing I had titled, Me and Daddy. The caption read, I've always believed in my daughter. I sacrificed everything to give her a chance. Today she's successful, and I couldn't be prouder. My stomach turned. He was rewriting the story. Making himself the hero of a journey he tried to sabotage. But this time the world wasn't buying it. Underneath the post were dozens of comments from family and distant friends who knew the truth. You mean you took her college fund? Aunt Patricia. What an amazing father. Draining your own kid's savings. Bravo. Cousin. Maybe sit this one out, Greg. He had hoped for applause. Instead he got silence, sarcasm, and reminders of what he had done. He deleted the post within an hour. But the damage was done to him. Not me. The final repayment from the court order came a month later. I got the notification during lunch. The last $2,500 wired into my new account. The one he never had access to. I stared at it for a long time. I wasn't expecting an apology, but I got a letter instead. His handwriting loopy, familiar. I opened it cautiously. Carol, I know I've made a lot of mistakes. But family is family. I don't want things to end this way. You've made it. You're successful. Can we go back to how things were? We can start over. I folded the letter once, twice, then laid it gently on the table. Forgiveness wasn't the issue. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I had everything I needed to move forward. But going back, that was never an option. It's strange, the things you remember most when you're finally free. It wasn't the screaming or the betrayals or the nights I cried myself to sleep that stuck in my mind. It was the silence after. The calm, eerie quiet that settled over my life when my father no longer had a voice in it. For the first time, I could breathe without wondering what strings were being pulled behind the scenes. But as peaceful as it was, that silence was deceptive. Because even when he was quiet, my father was still scheming. One gray Saturday morning in late November, I stepped out of the shower to find a voicemail blinking on my phone. No caller ID. I hesitated before pressing play. His voice crackled through. Carol, I saw your interview in the firm newsletter. Nice photo, by the way. Financial analyst in London. Not bad for a dropout. He laughed. That old, grating laugh like he was still the one in control. Look, I'm not calling to argue. I just think it's time we had a real conversation. You've proven your point. You won. Can we put this behind us? You know where to find me. I stood there dripping, towel clutched tight, staring at the wall like it might offer answers. I hadn't even known he subscribed to anything related to my work. I hadn't known he still cared. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe he just saw the rising value of my name and wanted to cash in while he still could. I deleted the message. That same week, I was invited to speak on a panel at a local university. Ironically, on the topic of financial literacy for young women. When I shared my story, carefully anonymized but still raw with truth, a girl in the front row burst into tears. Afterward, she waited until the crowd had thinned, then approached me slowly. He did the same to me, she whispered. My brother. He took out a loan in my name. I found out when I tried to get a student credit card. Everyone told me to forgive him. I looked her in the eyes. You don't have to forgive someone who isn't sorry. She nodded. I want to take my power back. That's when I knew this wasn't just my story. This was something bigger, a silent epidemic. Financial betrayal. Emotional theft. Parents stealing from children. Children taught to accept it in the name of love. It lit a fire in me. I began volunteering at a non-profit for women recovering from financial abuse. Every week, I sat in circles with women twice my age who cried telling me how their partners, parents, or siblings had drained them dry. Not just of money, but of belief in themselves. Each time I said the same thing. You're not alone. You're not crazy. And you're not weak. And every time I meant it more than the last. Meanwhile, back home, the fallout from my father's unraveling continued. The court had ordered full repayment of the funds, but now that the debt was cleared, he was scrambling to rebuild his image. His old friends had distanced themselves. His name, once associated with charm and deals and dinner parties, now summoned suspicion. And the worst part for him, people were laughing. He wasn't feared. He wasn't respected. He was pitied. A man who had once boasted about being in control of everything had been brought to his knees by his own daughter, a girl he thought he could manipulate forever. I hadn't intended to humiliate him, but I wasn't sorry it happened. The next time he reached out, it was through an email. The subject line read, "From one adult to another." I almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside he'd written, "Carol, I know I handled things poorly. I've done some reflecting. I was raised to believe a man provides, that even if he fails, he finds a way to protect his family. I thought I was doing that. I see now I hurt you. I hope someday we can talk. I don't want to die with this between us. I'm still your father. And I still love you, Dad." I read it twice. Then again. I wanted to believe he meant it. But here's the thing. Real reflection doesn't come after repayment. Comes before the damage is done. He had watched me suffer. He had chosen himself over and over again. And now, when everything was stripped away, then he wanted redemption.
Well,
I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the email to Aunt Lauren. She messaged back. Delete it. Let silence be your answer. And it was. I didn't owe him closure. He had cashed that check a long time ago. Instead, I poured my energy into my work. I was rising faster than I expected at the firm, earning the respect of clients twice my age. I even started working on a side project, a digital toolkit for students navigating financial aid, built to prevent the very kind of exploitation I had endured. Emma and I celebrated with wine on the balcony when the toolkit hit 10,000 downloads. He's probably watching from the shadows, she said with a grin. Furious you turned your pain into something useful. Smiled back. Good. But perhaps the most unexpected moment came that Christmas. I flew home to see my mom and grandma. It was snowing that morning. Light, feathery flakes that made everything feel new. My mother met me at the door with tears in her eyes and a hand-painted card that said, "You are the reason I found my strength." Inside was a small note and a key. "I bought a cottage," she whispered. "With my own name on the deed. I finally did it." I wrapped my arms around her and didn't let go. She had left him, rebuilt her life, found color again. And so had I. We weren't just survivors. We were architects of our own futures. I didn't think anything could surprise me anymore. Not after everything that had happened. But life, as it turns out, has a habit of catching you off guard when you finally feel safe. It was early spring when I got the email. Not from my father this time, but from a local journalist. Subject: Financial redemption or theft. The story behind a viral legal battle. Inside was a short message. "Hi Carol. I'm writing a feature on financial abuse in families. And your legal case recently surfaced through public records. I understand the subject is sensitive, but I believe your story could help countless people who feel powerless. Would you consider an interview?" My first instinct was to delete it. I didn't want the world to know. I had moved on, hadn't I? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that moving on didn't mean staying silent. What had happened to me wasn't just personal, it was systemic. And for every Carol Hazen who stood up and fought, there were thousands of girls and women and sons and brothers who couldn't, who didn't know how, who were still stuck in the fog of guilt and family loyalty. So I said yes. The interview took place in a small studio in Camden. I wore a navy blazer, kept my voice steady, and refused to let the story break me. I told the truth. How he stole my future, how he smiled while doing it, how he lied, how I took it back, piece by piece. They aired the segment a week later. I didn't watch it live. But Emma did. She called me halfway through, voice trembling. "You didn't just tell your story. You told ours. For all the people who never got the chance." And just like that, everything changed again. My inbox exploded with messages. Some from strangers, some from friends I hadn't spoken to in years. My mom drained my savings when I was 18. My brother forged my name for a car loan. My dad took my inheritance for a business deal, and never spoke to me again. They were all saying the same thing: "Thank you. You made me feel less alone." It was overwhelming, but also healing. For the first time, my story wasn't a wound, it was a weapon. Shield. A map for others to follow out of their own darkness. Meanwhile, back home, my father wasn't taking it well. Apparently, people had started recognizing him, not for the reasons he wanted. His name, once buried beneath years of half-truths and curated charm, was now a Google search away from shame. He called again. He even sent a handwritten letter, which arrived at my office, sealed in a cream-colored envelope with my name in careful cursive. Inside, "You've embarrassed me. You've destroyed my reputation. I can't walk into a room without people whispering. Was that your plan all along, to ruin me?" I read it once. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was desperate. He still thought this was about him. I tossed the letter into the shredder without a second thought. But the moment that finally truly solidified everything came on a quiet Sunday morning. I was at my grandmother's cottage, sipping tea with her in the sunroom, surrounded by her blooming potted violets. We sat in silence, the kind only two people who've survived storms together can share. Then she said, "Do you know what strength looks like, Carol?" I glanced up. "What?" She sipped her tea, her eyes shining. "It's not never being hurt. It's not even about fighting back. It's about healing, and choosing never to become like the people who hurt you." That hit me harder than any insult my father ever threw. She was right. I hadn't taken revenge. I hadn't destroyed him. I had simply refused to let him destroy me. And maybe, in the end, that was the greatest revenge of all. That afternoon, my mother joined us, bringing pastries from the new bakery in town. She was wearing jeans and a paint-streaked sweater. Her face flushed from walking in the wind. She looked happy. Not forced happy. Real happy. She handed me a box. Early birthday present. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a small, flat charm. On it, engraved in tiny script, were the words, "Unbreakable." I closed my hand around it, swallowing the sudden tightness in my throat. "Thank you." She smiled, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for teaching me that we didn't have to stay broken." Later that night, back in London, I sat on my couch looking out the window, the lights of the city flickering like stars. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the next disaster. I wasn't running. I wasn't recovering. I was living. Free. Independent. Unbreakable. 6 months later, I was asked to speak at a financial empowerment summit in Edinburgh. I almost said no. Not because I wasn't honored, but because a part of me feared stepping back into that spotlight would bring him back into my life. But then I remembered something my grandmother told me that day on her porch. Don't let fear be the narrator of your story. So I said yes. The auditorium was filled with young women, single mothers, immigrant students, professionals in their 40s and 50s. People who had been through the fire and were still walking. Maybe limping, maybe bruised, but walking. And when it was my turn, I walked to the podium in a tailored dark green dress, one I had bought with my own money, and looked out over the crowd. "My name is Carol Hazen," I began. "When I was 21, my father stole my entire college fund. And for a long time, I believed that meant he'd stolen my future too. But today, I'm standing here not as someone who was broken, but as someone who rebuilt." I told them everything. Not in a way that made me sound brave, but in a way that made them feel seen. I talked about guilt, about silence, about the kind of betrayal that hides behind a smile and says, "I'm doing this for your own good." And I ended with this. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to protect you become the ones you need protection from. But just because they gave you life doesn't mean they get to steal it. You are not ungrateful for setting boundaries. You are not cruel for seeking justice. And you are not broken because you refuse to let someone else write your ending. When the applause ended, I stepped off the stage and walked into a sea of women with wet eyes and outstretched hands. They weren't fans, they were survivors. Like me. That night I got back to my flat and opened the window. London buzzed below, as it always did, like a quiet heartbeat. I made a cup of tea, sat down, and finally opened the last envelope I had been avoiding for months. One final message from my father. It had come weeks ago, unsigned, just a single sheet of paper. I had tossed it in a drawer, unsure if I wanted to read it. But tonight something inside me said it was time. It read, "You win. Hope you're happy. I lost everything. I hope that was worth it." I folded the letter once and placed it in the bin. 'Cause yes, it was worth it. Every step. Every boundary. Every moment of discomfort that eventually gave birth to peace. He hadn't lost everything because of me. He lost everything because he believed no one would ever hold him accountable. Because he believed daughters were currency, not people. But I wasn't his anymore. A week later, I walked into my office and saw a surprise waiting on my desk. A certificate framed in polished wood. In recognition of excellence and advocacy. Carol Hazen. Empowering women through financial justice. I stared at it, stunned. I didn't cry. Smiled. Emma barged in moments later, holding 2 coffees. "They're sending your name to a shortlist for the Women in Finance Awards. You better write a speech." I raised an eyebrow. "You sure they got the right Carol?" "Don't play humble," she laughed. "You earned this." And she was right. I had earned everything. Not just the accolades or career milestones, but the freedom to live without shame, without fear, without the voice in my head that once sounded like his. The final repayment my father had made to me wasn't the last bank deposit. It was the silence that followed. The knowledge that I owed him nothing. Not a phone call. Not a reply. Not even forgiveness. A few months later, my mother visited me in London again. We spent the weekend walking by the Thames, sipping wine under fairy lights, and talking like friends. She was painting full-time now, her work hanging in local cafes. She had reclaimed her name, her bank account, her voice. "You know," she said, "I thought I'd feel hollow when it was over. The divorce. The court battles. Losing everything we thought we built." I looked at her. "Do you?" She smiled. "No. I've never felt fuller." That night, I opened a blank journal and wrote 3 words at the top of the first page. "My life begins." 'Cause it did. Not after the betrayal. Not after the court case. But after I let go of the version of me who needed his approval. The version of me who confused survival with loyalty. In the end, I didn't just reclaim my money. I reclaimed myself. And now, every time I walk into a boardroom or click submit on a new initiative or speak to a girl who whispers, "I thought I was the only one," I know why it happened. I was meant to go through the fire, so I could walk others out of it. Sometimes, the deepest betrayals come from the people we trusted most. But we are not defined by what they took. We are defined by what we choose to rebuild. Carol Hazen's story reminds us that speaking the truth, even when it's painful, is the first step toward freedom. If you've ever been silenced, stolen from, or doubted, know that you have the power to take it all back. Subscribe to Revenge Echoes for more true-to-life stories of justice, strength, and redemption. Share your thoughts below. Your story might be the one that helps someone else heal.